Welcome to Wisdom of the Bible channel. The birth of Moses stands out in the book of Exodus, emphasizing how crucial he would become in the Chronicles of Israel. His entrance into the world revealed God's divine care and foresight, ensuring Moses would survive dangerous circumstances. Moses entered a Levite family, descended from Levi, with parents named Amram and Jochebed. Their tribal lineage connected him to the Levites, as reflected in Exodus 6:16-20. He had two siblings, Aaron and Miriam, both holding essential roles among the Hebrews. Aaron rose as Israel's first high priest, while Miriam acted as a guiding older sister and prophetess. At Moses' birth, the Israelites served as slaves in Egypt, and Pharaoh ordered all newborn Hebrew boys drowned in the Nile. Jochebed hid Moses for 3 months, then placed him in a basket sealed with pitch and bitumen, leaving him among the reeds. Pharaoh's daughter discovered this child along the riverbank, adopting him into Egyptian royalty, unknowingly returning him to Jochebed for nursing, a twist that showcased God's providence. Exodus 2:1-10 narrates that once Moses was weaned, he officially became Pharaoh's daughter's son, yet he remained aware of his Hebrew identity, which later drove him to defend his people. Raised in the Egyptian court, Moses enjoyed elite education and privilege. Acts 7:20-22 suggests he excelled in wisdom and action, though his true calling lay beyond palace life. When Moses became an adult, he chose solidarity with the Hebrews instead of Egyptian wealth. That fateful decision led him to eventually champion their release from bondage. Biblical tradition indicates little about how Amram and Jochebed first met. We only know they descended from Levi, linking them by ancestry and shared family customs. Exodus highlights that Jochebed was Levi's daughter, and Amram, a descendant of Kohath, married her. Their union, though close kin, reflected norms of the era for preserving tribal lines. They had Aaron, Miriam, and Moses, each destined for pivotal service. Jochebed's courage, seen in her effort to save Moses, exemplified faith under duress. Together, these 3 children shaped Hebrew history. With Moses leading them from Egyptian tyranny, the narrative underscores how God's plans can hinge upon humble origins. Egyptian oppression pervades Exodus, intensified when a new Pharaoh arose who knew nothing of Joseph. He feared the Hebrews might become allies of potential enemies, so he imposed crushing labor. In building cities like Pithom and Ramesses, the Hebrews toiled under severe conditions. Pharaoh then demanded that every male Israelite infant be discarded in the Nile. Amid this cruelty, God prepared Moses, who would facilitate a future exodus. The stage was set for divine intervention, as the Israelites cried out for deliverance. Moses' life in Egypt appears in Exodus 2-4, displaying his adoption by Pharaoh's daughter. It also covers his internal conflict and eventual departure to Midian. As a newborn, he escaped execution through Jochebed's hidden tactics. Exodus 2:1-10 recounts that once discovered by Pharaoh's daughter, he was raised in the royal sphere. He was mighty in words and deeds, as Acts 7:22 affirms, but he soon recognized the pain his own people endured under slavery. One day, Moses saw an Egyptian striking a Hebrew, prompting him to kill that oppressor. He buried the body in the sand, hoping to hide the evidence. The following day, he tried to stop 2 Hebrews from fighting. They questioned whether he would endanger them as he had the Egyptian. When Pharaoh learned of this, he sought to execute Moses. Moses thus fled to Midian, fearing for his life and fully grasping his place among the Hebrews. In Midian, Moses found tranquility. Settling far from the Egyptian court, he married Zipporah, a daughter of Jethro, also called Ruel, and tended sheep. Exodus 2:15-22 explains that Moses developed humility and practical skills in that desert setting. His spiritual awareness grew, preparing him for the great work ahead. God spoke to Moses at Horeb, the mountain of God, through the burning bush that did not burn up. Exodus 3 depicts this first mighty encounter between God and Moses. Seeing the bush untouched by fire, Moses approached. God called, "Moses, Moses," and Moses replied, "Here I am," preserving the exact words. God then revealed the plan. He heard Israel's cries in Egypt and chose Moses as their liberator. Exodus 3:7-10 underscores how Moses would lead them to Canaan. When Moses asked God's name, God replied, "I am that I am," telling Moses to say, "I am sent him." This direct disclosure of the divine name signaled unparalleled intimacy. Exodus 3:13-15. Moses expressed self-doubt, but God pledged that Aaron would speak for him. Several signs were granted so Pharaoh and the Israelites would know God's authority. This encounter forged a profound bond between Moses and God. It prefaced the miraculous events that would reshape Israel's destiny. Reluctant but obedient, Moses returned to Egypt with Aaron. They convinced the Israelite elders by performing God's signs, and the elders believed. Pharaoh, however, spurned the request to let the Israelites worship in the desert. He increased their labor, intensifying their hardship. God responded by sending plagues upon Egypt, designed to display divine power. Exodus 7-12 meticulously lists the sequence of 10 devastating plagues. The first plague turned the Nile's water into a dark hue, affecting fish and safe drinking water. Exodus 7:14-24 records the transformation and its effect on Egypt. Next came frogs covering houses, rooms, ovens, and utensils. Exodus 8:1-15 portrays a massive invasion that tormented every corner of the land. Then small pests emerged as Aaron struck the dust, turning it into an infestation upon men and beasts. Exodus 8:16-19 tells how even magicians failed to match this act. Swarms of buzzing insects followed, harassing Egyptians but sparing Goshen. Exodus 8:20-30 clarifies that God made a distinction between Hebrews and Egyptians. The fifth plague brought a severe affliction upon Egyptian livestock. Exodus 9:1-7 confirms that Israelite animals remained unharmed. Next, painful sores broke out on humans and animals when Moses scattered furnace ash. This plague, Exodus 9:8-12, demonstrated God's power over health. After that came a fierce hailstorm pounding the fields, accompanied by thunder and lightning. Exodus 9:13-35 states that unprotected crops and creatures faced destruction. An east wind then delivered swarms of locusts, devouring any growth left after the hail. Exodus 10:1-20 recounts how they ruined Egypt's remaining vegetation. Thick darkness covered the land for 3 days, preventing normal life. Yet the Israelites had light, as stated in Exodus 10:21-29. Finally, the plague of the firstborn struck at midnight, affecting many in Egypt. The Hebrews who marked their doors were spared. Exodus 11:1-12:30. Pharaoh relented, allowing Israel's departure, leading to the Exodus. This pivotal moment marked a turning point in their journey to the Promised Land. The crossing of the Red Sea is among the Bible's most powerful miracles. Described in Exodus 14 and 15, it epitomizes God's deliverance from Egyptian captivity. Pharaoh pursued the Israelites with chariots after regretting his decision. Exodus 14:5-7 recounts how he mobilized a formidable force. God directed the Israelites to camp by Pi-Hahiroth, near the sea. When the Egyptians closed in, the people panicked. Exodus 14:1-12. Moses calmed them, declaring, "Do not be afraid. Stand still and see the deliverance of the Lord," assuring them God would fight for them. Exodus 14:13-14. By God's command, Moses raised his staff over the water, parting the sea overnight. Walls of water rose on each side, and the seabed became dry ground. Exodus 14:15-22. The Israelites crossed safely, but when the Egyptians followed, the waters swept back. The entire Egyptian army was overwhelmed. Exodus 14:26-28. Witnessing God's power, Israel revered the Lord and trusted Moses. Miriam led them in a celebratory song of gratitude. Exodus 15:1-21. This crossing symbolizes divine intervention against impossible odds, strengthening faith and defining Israel's relationship with God. Shortly after, they traveled 3 days without fresh water and reached Marah. The water there was bitter, prompting the people to complain. Exodus 15:22-24. Moses implored God, who directed him to place a piece of wood into the water. It became sweet, proving God's care continued beyond the Red Sea crossing. At Marah, God tested their loyalty, promising blessings if they obeyed his commands. He revealed himself as their healer, establishing statutes for their guidance. Passover, instituted in Exodus 12 and 13, commemorates the Israelites' release from bondage. It was inaugurated just before the 10th affliction and remains vital to remembering God's intervention. Each household chose a flawless lamb on the 10th day of Nisan, sacrificing it on the 14th. Its mark was placed on their door frames so the destroying force would pass by. Exodus 12:1-7. They roasted the lamb and ate it with bitter herbs and unleavened bread in haste. This readiness symbolized departure from Egypt. Exodus 12:8-11. At midnight, an angelic avenger visited Egyptian firstborns. From royal to captive, Pharaoh conceded, freeing the Hebrews. Exodus 12:29-32. God commanded the annual Passover festival with unleavened bread for 7 days. Exodus 12:14-20 highlights its enduring significance for Israel's collective memory. This ordinance taught future generations about God's mighty salvation. When your children say to you, "What is this rite of yours?" you shall say, remains an exact quote. After Passover and the Red Sea crossing, the Hebrews embarked on a winding desert trek. Despite tangible miracles, they often fell into disobedience. One major failure was the golden calf incident, when Moses ascended Sinai to receive God's law. During his absence, the people grew impatient, asking Aaron to craft an idol. Exodus 32. They worshipped that calf, prompting Moses to break the stone tablets in anger. He ordered the Levites to take decisive action. About 3,000 perished that day. A plague then befell the camp, further emphasizing the severity of idol worship. God later permitted Moses to return for new tablets, but the people's sin left deep consequences. Korah, Dathan, and Abiram led another revolt, undermining Moses and Aaron's authority. The earth opened, and fire consumed their assembly. Numbers 16. The people also grumbled about manna, expressing ingratitude for God's daily provision. Their constant complaints brought forth quail and a subsequent punishment. Numbers 11:31-33. They even refused to enter the Promised Land after the spies' negative report. As a result, that generation wandered 40 years, except Joshua and Caleb. These acts of disobedience showed that doubting God's guidance always resulted in judgment. Yet God's mercy persisted, shaping Israel's development in the desert. Regarding Moses seeing God's face, Exodus 33 explains the true nature of that encounter. Moses requested, "I beseech thee, show me thy glory," hoping to glimpse God fully. God replied that no human could see his face and live, so he placed Moses in a rock cleft. He covered Moses with his hand as he passed, allowing Moses only a partial view. Exodus 33:21-23. Afterward, Moses descended Sinai with his face shining brightly. He wore a veil among the Israelites except when talking to God or relaying God's words. This event underscored Moses' unique relationship with the Almighty, reminding Israel that direct exposure to God's full glory is beyond mortal capacity. The 10 Commandments emerged at Sinai, forming a cornerstone for Israel's moral code. God first spoke them aloud to the people amid thunder, lightning, and a thick cloud. Exodus 19:2-20. Frightened by the divine voice, the Israelites insisted Moses mediate instead, so he ascended the mountain, receiving the commandments on stone tablets. Those commandments include, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me," and "Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image." They continue with forbidding the misuse of God's name, honoring the Sabbath, and respecting parents. They also prohibit taking life unlawfully, adultery, theft, bearing false witness, and covetousness. These serve as the enduring framework for biblical ethics. Exodus 21:2-17. While Moses lingered on Sinai, the people constructed the golden calf. Enraged upon seeing this idolatry, Moses shattered the original tablets. Later, God commanded him to carve 2 new tablets, rewriting the law. This reaffirmed the covenant, showing divine willingness to restore what was broken. The 10 Commandments stand as a moral bedrock in Judeo-Christian traditions. Their influence is visible in legal systems, cultural norms, and personal ethics. They remind believers to uphold core virtues like honesty, fidelity, and reverence. Across centuries, this code has guided many societies toward justice and compassion. In Jewish life, the commandments anchor Torah observance. For Christians, they reflect God's principles and align with Jesus' teachings of love. Overall, they symbolize a covenant with God, urging adherence to divine instruction. Universal values of kindness and truth can be traced back to their guidance. While originally tied to Israel's unique covenant, these precepts echo in diverse cultures. They remain a reference point for anyone seeking moral clarity and harmony. The Promised Land concept arises from God's pledge to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It envisioned a territory flowing with milk and honey, as mentioned in Genesis 12:1-7. Renewed to each patriarch, this promise directed the descendants toward Canaan. Modern approximations include regions of Israel, Palestine, Jordan, and nearby areas. Moses' leadership centered on guiding Israel from Egypt toward this land, though he ultimately would not enter it himself due to prior disobedience. Exodus narrates how God led the people out with wonders, preparing them for Canaan, yet doubt and defiance delayed their arrival. culminating in a 40-year desert period. Joshua eventually took the mantle, crossing the Jordan to conquer territory. Jericho fell first, inaugurating Israel's establishment in that land. Joshua 1-6. The Promised Land symbolizes God's faithfulness and covenant fulfillment. For Christians, it can also point to a future heavenly inheritance. It embodies both physical blessings and spiritual aspirations, a testament to God's steadfast dedication to those who trust His direction. Conflicts over possession and fidelity to God dotted Israel's history. Through triumphs and trials, they realized that devotion was key to flourishing there. Modern implications persist. As this land still holds deep religious and cultural resonance, Jews identify it as an ancestral legacy, while others find hope in its biblical significance. Eventually, Moses' story reached its conclusion in Deuteronomy 34. Though he guided Israel near Canaan, he could only view it from afar. God had decreed that Moses would not enter the Promised Land after the incident with the rock. Instead, Moses ascended Mount Nebo, glimpsing the lush territory stretched before him. There, God announced, "This is the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Yet Moses would not cross into it, fulfilling the divine word. Moses died on that mount at 120 years old. With his strength and eyesight still intact, God personally buried him in Moab, and no one knows his grave's location. For 30 days, the Israelites mourned Moses in the plains of Moab. His passing closed an epic era in which he had served as a mediator between God and his people. Joshua, son of Nun, inherited Moses' leadership role. Full of the spirit of wisdom, the people heeded him as Moses had instructed, marking a new chapter in Israel's story. Deuteronomy 34:10-12 recounts that, "There arose not a prophet since in Israel like unto Moses. He was peerless in signs and wonders performed before Pharaoh and in all of Egypt." His legacy defined Israel's faith and identity, grounded in trust and reverence for God. As the architect of Israel's formative journey, Moses stands as an enduring figure. From his unlikely rescue as an infant, to his final view of the land he would never inhabit, Moses exemplified unwavering obedience once he accepted his divine mission. He remains the towering prophet who spoke with God face to face, shaping the covenant. His life's narrative has guided believers for generations as they reflect on devotion and faithfulness. This script, rewritten to maintain its essence, preserves the events and details of Moses' story, testifying that each stage of his life carried purpose, forging a leader who changed history. Through each miracle, commandment, and trial, Moses continually pointed to God's sovereignty, ensuring that his people recognized and honored the one who had delivered them from bondage. Thus, Moses' birth, upbringing, and leadership illustrate how divine planning can uplift unlikely individuals. His journey from hidden infant to revered prophet demonstrates what faithful service can accomplish. Though he never set foot in the Promised Land, Moses bequeathed a lasting spiritual inheritance. His influence endures in the lives of those who study his example of courage and devotion. To this day, believers reflect on Moses as a model of humility who carried out God's commands, and his testimony affirms that even in humanity's frailty, divine grace can fulfill extraordinary purposes.
Hello, dear viewers. Thank you for watching our channel, Wisdom of the Bible. I personally invite you to subscribe to our channel. It supports us and helps us create more videos. Thank you, and God bless you.